Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to yet another series of our Humanist TV Africa, where we are looking at all issues that are affecting us as consumers. And these issues that touch our daily living, our daily processes as consumers. So, ladies and gentlemen, I find that today we are getting the opportunity to discuss yet another issue with regards to food safety. Food safety, last year, we started this series in February, and we are honored once again to have Professor Kaya joining us. Professor Kaya joining us, and once again, we are very honored to have you and see to it that we addressed issues that are affecting us as a country. So today we are having Professor Kaya once again to share with us, and also to have our other colleague Agnes Chilabo joining us, with whom we have been campaigning with aspects to do with aflatoxin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to do any more curtain riser, but only to say that, Professor, you are most welcome to tell us what is aflatoxin, what do we need to do, how is it affecting us, how does it come, what are issues do we need to do as duty bearers, as food businesses, as in farmers, traders, aggregators, processors, and then as the consumers. Now, we are looking at before farm and after fork. How do we address aflatoxin, all microtoxins in general? Issues that are affecting Uganda are affecting all other consumers on the continent and consumers globally. So, Professor, your building blocks will not only benefit Ugandans, but they will benefit everything to do with humanity. So, Professor, greatly to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chimera. Hello, viewers. Let me take this opportunity to thank so much Mr. Chimera and his team, especially Bernard, for giving me this opportunity to talk about aflatoxins, which is a very important subject, as most of you heard recently when our president, His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, gave his speech on 26th January this year, NRM Day, celebrating our NRM Day. He said that he's going to ban, a trade of shelled groundnuts because of aflatoxin. Indeed, the president was right, because groundnuts are one of the candidate produce, as far as the aflatoxins are concerned. Now, straight to the point, because I have limited time. What are aflatoxins? Why are we concerned about aflatoxins? Aflatoxins are a group of mycotoxins. When you talk about mycotoxins, we're referring to fungal. Myco means fungal toxins, which are found in the produce that have been dried. Um, what happens that fungi, which invade dried foodstuffs, which mainly belong to three genera, although there are others, mainly Aspergillus, Fusarium, and Penicillium. invade the dried produce. But aflatoxins are particularly produced by a fungus known as Aspergillus flavus. Hence the name Aspergillus flavus toxins, abbreviated as aflatoxins. They are secondary metabolites of this, fungus. There are even other now fungi which have been, implicated in producing aflatoxins, Aspergillus parasiticus, and some extent even I have seen Aspergillus niger being implicated. But mainly Aspergillus flavus is the one which produces mainly aflatoxin B1, that is very, very, very dangerous. Now, the International Agency for Research on Cancer has named the aflatoxin as the number one carcinogenic compound, meaning that it actually has the possibility of causing cancer, especially the liver cancer. So, their secondary metabolites, meaning that the molds enter the food as they eat, they produce these toxins, as waste products. And when you cook food or when you roast, food like groundnuts, you don't actually eliminate these toxins. Why? Because they are chemicals, very, very highly stable chemicals, and their melting point is about 420 degrees Celsius. So this is one of the biggest challenges that are facing us, because the ordinary farmers consumers think that once they cook the food where aflatoxins are, that is going to be eliminated. No, you don't actually eliminate. Instead you can kill the mold, but you don't actually eliminate the toxins. So that's why they are actually very, very important. And scientists have studied the aflatoxins further, and they have established that there are different types: the B1 and the B2. Those ones, when you are determining them, they fluoresce, blue to UV light. And then there is the green type, the G type, G1 and G2. Those are the fluoresce green. But the B group, especially B1, are the most potent. There's also another category, aflatoxin M, the M1, which can be found in milk, meat, and eggs. This is now a metabolite of aflatoxin B, group, which has been now broken down by the liver. And when the liver cannot manage to eliminate completely, it sends the remnants of these toxins, in the form of toxin M, into milk, meat, and eggs, among others. So, where are aflatoxins found? Which foods are mainly, contaminated by aflatoxins? As I mentioned, that the molds mainly love dried products. These toxins can mainly be found in our dried, produce. Those produce that we primarily process on farm, which include maize, sorghum, millet, cassava chips, then groundnuts, of course, then tree nuts, and then all most of these dried, foodstuffs, including even spices, and even fish, especially silverfish, mokene. Since this can be dried even on bare ground, it has also been found to be contaminated. And then, as I've mentioned, they can also be found in milk, meat, and eggs, as byproducts of, the liver. Now, um, aflatoxins can also be found in animal feeds, because most of the ingredients that are used to make for making animal feeds include maize, soybean, silverfish, mukene, and others, cotton seed cake, which are all candidates of aflatoxins. So once the raw materials are contaminated, even the animal feeds are going to be contaminated, since processing of these raw materials into animal feeds does not affect aflatoxins. So, as we normally say, garbage in, garbage out. If you have got a contaminated raw material like maize, soybean, etc., even the animal feeds will be contaminated. And once animals eat these, feeds which are contaminated, then the toxins end up into milk, eggs, and meat. So you may not survive these toxins in bad grains, which are normally fed to animals, thinking that actually, you not find them anywhere else, but you're likely to find them in these animal products. So, why are we mainly concerned about aflatoxins? What are the effects? Aflatoxins cause both health, economic, and also food security issues. So the trade, the health, and then in terms of availability of food, aflatoxins have a direct effect in there. In terms of health, aflatoxins have been, reported everywhere to be linked, first of all, to acute toxicity. Um, if you eat a foodstuff containing high levels of aflatoxins, you can actually die immediately, like what happened in Kenya in 2004 and also Tanzania in 2016, and even earlier on in Uganda in the early 70s. A boy ate cassava having high levels of aflatoxins and actually end up dying. So they can cause acute toxicity, death, you know, and also chronic toxicity. Chronic toxicity mainly is manifested in terms of liver cancer, then reduction of immune system because of challenges with the binding major nutrients in the body, including proteins, minerals like zinc and iron. And of course, when that actually happens, they are now linked to challenges in the children, like stunting, kwashiorkor, etc. Aflatoxins have also been related to HIV and malaria, because especially the tropics, because of the reduced, immune system. So they are not actually good. In addition to affecting us humans, they also affect animals. As I've said, if the animal eats actually feeds which are contaminated, so many farmers, especially those poultry, rabbit, dog, fish farmers, have had several challenges with aflatoxins causing immediate death of their animals or actually reducing productivity. Like for example, poultry, they can stop laying eggs at once, or they can reduce the laying capacity per day, or the birds may even fail to grow, like in case of broilers. But also there can be immediate death. For instance, in 2023, a farmer in Nigeria lost 2,000 birds all at once. You can imagine that kind of loss. If the guy had actually got a loan from the bank, what kind of loss? My father, as I've always said, the last year lost 116 birds at once because of aflatoxin contaminated feeds. So I had a friend of mine who lost about 500 rabbits because they ate pellets which were contaminated with the aflatoxin. So those are the health effects. As far as trade is concerned, definitely, let me tell you, this week I have been, having traders. I met on Tuesday. I met over 200 granite traders. They mobilized the money and they came to Makerere University, and I met them and sensitized them about aflatoxin. So when I was talking about the effects of aflatoxin on trade, I first asked them, do I need to explain this effect? Because already you have put in the money, you have put in the time to come here. Isn't that an effect on trade? They said, oh, yes, it is. And we can now see they are now fumbling around because of the president's, a threat to issue an executive, order, banning the, trade of shelled groundnuts. So you can already see now Uganda has suffered a lot, in terms of rejections of especially maize. Kenya has been rejecting our maize up to last year, 2024, losing a lot of money in billions of shillings. When South Sudan rejected our consignments, maize consignments, we lost over 2 million Uganda shillings. No, actually 2 million US dollars. See, so all that is lost which is associated with aflatoxin. Plus now Uganda is well known, we are about to be blacklisted. The export potential of our produce has reduced. Countries where we used to export a lot of maize, like Rwanda, they have reduced, importing our maize. So all those are effects on trade. And then in most cases, once the maize is rejected, the effect actually trickles back to the ordinary farmer. The maize stays there, not bought, and then the price continues to go down, 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 down. Actually, in 2021, when Kenya rejected our maize, the price, of maize at farm level reduced from 700 to 200 shillings, requiring you to sell a whole bag of 120 kilograms to buy a kilogram of sugar. That's terrible. So many farmers were now opting to stop growing maize. And you know the implication of this in terms of food security. So now, in terms of trade, that's very, very unfortunate. In terms of course, food security, once rejected, that food is supposed to be destroyed and becomes unavailable to the consumer, to the households. So you see, that one actually has got a direct implication. There are a number of, I think, consignments, a number of products which have been recalled from supermarkets, you know, uh, uh, because of aflatoxin contamination, peanut butter, maize flour, well packaged. You can imagine the amount of money that somebody put in to to package the products, and then of course transporting them to the supermarkets, and then they are rejected, then they are supposed to be destroyed. So in terms of food security, that is very, very unfortunate. The other question that he was asked to me by Mr. Chimera was, um, what is being now, done currently, as far as the prevention of aflatoxin is concerned. Well, there are efforts, um, including serious efforts that he started way back in 2014 when the Partnership for Aflatoxin Control in Africa initiated its studies in Uganda. Uganda was one of the pilot countries up to 2018 when we developed the strategy to, which involved the action plan for mitigation of aflatoxin in the country. So a number of activities were actually done, but up to now, research is still continuing. Research on AflaSafe is now complete, and AflaSafe now, which is one of the best measures of preventing aflatoxin contamination pre-harvest, now has reached the commercialization stage, and is now being they are trying somebody who over to see that the AflaSafe can now be distributed among the farmers that are applied, that is contamination. So I think that is something which is good. Secondly, there are so many research institutions, universities, especially, and also the National Agricultural Research Organization. Research on our resistant varieties, research on managing actually control using, for example, herbs, local herbs, spices, microorganisms. All this research is going on. In addition to research on estimating the contamination levels and also the exposure risks of aflatoxins. So that is being done, and most of it is unfortunately supported by development partners. People write proposals, they get grants to do that. So government involvement has been there in terms of establishing standards Uganda National Bureau of Standards has been doing playing a very big role, and also Ministry of Trade in general, helping government to to manage the problem. I think a lot needs to be done. For instance, when we analyze the 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 2018 strategy last year, thanks to Madam Agnes Kirabo, managed to get some funding on behalf of the Alliance. They supported this work, established that actually government involvement has been there to implement the plan, but a lot was actually lacking. Rethink on the activities, action plans that were suggested in the plan, and then takes it directly. Indeed, even in the recent CADAP meeting that took place in Kampala, Aflatoxin actually food safety, issues affecting Africa. So if we advise the government to take up some of those during this CADAP meeting. I think the last question was about who are the key players, in controlling. And I think that one directly answered it. Traders now, as I mentioned, they have come out strongly to contribute towards managing aflatoxin now that their business is being, they are worried. Some of them have been, dealing in this business for over 30 years. They have grown up selling donuts, and now, they are doing so. So they are already, what if the president really their business, what are they going to do? So, all of us, when I met the traders, I informed them that aflatoxin management is everybody's business. It is not only researchers, not government, everybody must be involved, including even consumers. And this is why Mr. Kimera came up so strongly with his team on behalf of Consent to ensure that people are aware of aflatoxins, because I think awareness campaigns and advocacy was number one action plan within the that plan mitigating aflatoxin. And last year, level, the number is and aflatoxin contamination. So awareness is there. Enforcement of the standards is important, because we've got it just as we can aflatoxin. I think they need to be enforced. So that's where government role, and advised the as they wait for government to do that, they need to do self-policing. Let themselves organize amongst themselves to to come up with these strategies on punishing those traders who are mishandling groundnuts. I told them where the problem actually is coming from. In addition to the machines that they are using, corporate machines, they mean groundnuts which are broken, which are diseased, which are rivaled, which are actually have high levels of aflatoxin. So to check their our practices, especially the good manufacturing practices, the hygienic practices. Hygiene and sanitation is a serious issue. Yeah, it is. This is where we'll stop. I know if there are questions, I'm ready to actually answer them. But thank you very much for giving this opportunity to continue advocating for management and control of aflatoxin. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. I will never stop thanking you, because you always keep building our capacities, sharing with us. And I would like very quickly to thank you, having led us into even telling the business community the cereals, the grains you're dealing in bring bread and butter, bring livelihoods to you. You should respect them. That makes it everyone's business. Like I already alluded to, all these initiatives we are looking at, we need to think before talk and after talk. And all these are bringing out these issues. Professors, thank you very much for the social, economic, even the environmental aspects. Once it is condemned, the natural resources are taken away. So the consumers ourselves, we get quality, but because we miss out on handling it well, we abuse it. All that you have shared with us, Professor, doesn't only apply in Uganda, but it applies globally. The research, the capacity building, the issues to do with the awareness and communication, advocacy, and good governance. And this opens up the flow. Agnes, you're most welcome. And I always like to refer to you like Mama kick aflatoxin out of Uganda. But now this will go kick aflatoxin out of the global world, bringing in the Ugandan experience. How can our neighbors, how can the continent, how can the global world learn from Uganda? And we are greatly honored to have you on this series. And Agi, if you could remember, February last year, we still discussed aflatoxin as we were in the transition of launching the kick aflatoxin out of Uganda. So we are honored to have you again after 1 year, the first anniversary of campaigning on against aflatoxin on Humanist TV. Agnes, the floor is yours, and share with us the bounty that you have. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Henry. I'm delighted. I don't think we have met at the Humanist, and I just wish to say Happy New Year to you and to Professor and to Bunny and everybody out there that is watching us. I'm very excited to be back at the Humanist TV, and thank you for congratulating me and congratulating ourselves, because all of you, as we are in the studio, we have been together through this journey of 1 year. That to me, it is a fulfilling year. It has been a fulfilling journey. You're not flogging a dead horse and you see it running again. I think we deserve a cup of coffee one of these days to congratulate ourselves. Secondly, also very excited that as we are coming to celebrate our first year anniversary of the joint advocacy campaign on aflatoxin control in Uganda, we see the Fountain of Honor weighing in. I think for me, that was my Christmas in January. I celebrate and I continue to celebrating that. Why capitalizing on this is to energize and strengthen advocates out there that you shouldn't be lied to, that our advocacy efforts do not yield. Actually, the president in his statement said he had received numerous reports. He had received several information. And therefore, our voice, Professor Kaya, Bernard, and Henry, and others that have been part of this journey, our voices were being heard. And therefore, I think it's not only humanist that is saying, ruta continua, let us get up and wear our war garments and then soldier on, because now the commander-in-chief is now in command. So it's quite very, very exciting. Thank you, Professor, for giving us that broad, but also the specific aspects of what we are actually dealing with. And we want listeners out there to know that what we are talking about, the issue of aflatoxin contamination in our food and in our feed. We are going to write commandments this year. Commandments, and we are also going to write a creed, like an apostles' creed, on things that we believe and things that we say we are not going to do in this year, in as far as aflatoxin control is concerned. It is no longer debatable the impact it has, but I need to emphasize from what Professor has said, two critical areas. Area number one is the issue of livelihoods. You know, more often than not, we separate livelihoods from economics. And for me, one person described me as a realist, and I love to be that. I'm a realist. I look at things in the real life because that is who I am. A professor properly put it. If you all looked and watched that professor, you could imagine his age. He's not below 50. But if he tells you about his father losing 100 and so birds, that doesn't mean that, it automatically means rather that professor's father could not be 52. He's far in his retirement, but he still wants to live a life of dignity, not depending on his children. So an old man who is 70 or 80 years and above, losing 160 something birds, what does that exactly mean? To his emotional stability, to his dignity, to his power to provide for his life, but also to provide for his household. And I believe we know Professor's father because we are consistently working with Professor's father. He's not alone. There are millions of women, because poultry is a woman's enterprise largely. There are millions of women who have borrowed money, and I have seen them. My mother was one of them. Way back when I was still in school, I could not tell until this day. You would wake up when the birds are dead. And this eats into the social fabric, because in the rural areas, that is unheard of. It goes into destabilizing the social relationships, thinking somebody bewitched the birds, somebody must have passed by, somebody gave them poison. That's what the community is talking about. So it dips from the livelihoods, the dignity, the human dignity of this smallholder farmer to his or her social relationships. I also want to underline another thing that Professor talked about, the issue of food security. And he has clearly put it. If a kilogram of maize, because of the turbulences due to aflatoxin contamination, losing the markets in Kenya and Sudan, results in the reduction of the maize grain price to 200 shillings, and that a household has to sell a whole bag of 100 kgs to buy a kilogram of, Professor, don't talk about sugar. Under such circumstances, among farmers, sugar becomes a luxurious product. We go back to the basics. Buying a bar of soap, buying kerosene to light their lamp at night, meeting the minimum needs of a household. You need to sell a whole bag of maize. And for me, this is where my point is. If a household loses so much of its produce to acquire basic needs, that is too much food leaving a household. And the next day, the farming households are the most hungry households. It's because they have to lose a lot of what they have produced just to get the basics of life. That's about the farmers. But do you recall when trucks were parked for days, for weeks, at the Uganda-Sudan border? For us, all what we are looking at, some of us were much concerned about the produce that was aboard those trucks, only to realize that actually the trucks were hired trucks. So the drivers who had been hired to carry the produce are not the owners of the trucks. The owners of the trucks are far away from this. But then most of these traders are aggregators and off-takers. They had taken grain from the farmers on credit. So now it came a time the owner of the truck is tracking his truck and it is stationed for weeks. They need their truck. The drivers, they need to go for another assignment. The consignments are on there. You see? So look at the levels of livelihoods that are impacted by just a small thing that we are discussing here called aflatoxins. So for me, we need to bring aflatoxins to you who is viewing us. We are not talking about anything. We are not talking about macroeconomics, or we lost so many $1 million, or this. No. We are talking about you and me. Let me also shed for you another aspect where aflatoxin actually is your business. The schools have just opened, and our children have gone back to school. And our campaign revealed to us that the biggest consumers of meal are our school-going children. And in 2024, at least it treated us to 2 cases of schools. And I believe there are so many of them. But because now they are entrepreneurs, the schools are people's big businesses, they may not allow these stories to come out anymore. So our children are the biggest consumers of this contaminated maize. I want to, if I had an opportunity to interact with you, viewers, the term has just started. Who among us mobilized money to take your child to school to be sick? And sometimes, yes, it is the neglect of the school administration, but like a professor has said, the journey through which food gets contaminated with aflatoxins is very long. How many of us, when we go to schools, inspect the food stores of our schools where we have taken our children? How many of us inspect the kitchen area? Or you're treated to flyers with the menu of what your children are going to eat, and you think that is where it ends. Many schools, as they have opened, they have not gotten designated, constructed places on standards as provided for by the Bureau of Standards that meet the requirements of food stores. Many of them now have stocked tons and tons of maize flour. And this is what they are going to give our children up to April when they break. They are in stores, they are packed. Did we check? How vigilant has the Ministry of Education remained on the instructions of public stocking, but as well the storage and management of school feeding? Are you still thinking that this aflatoxin conversation is because you pound your own groundnuts? No, it is part of you. So, like Professor said in his conclusion, that aflatoxin control is everybody's business, I just need to reiterate that when products or produce is condemned, contaminated with aflatoxins beyond the acceptable levels, it is not good for the animal feed. This practice of thinking that animals eat waste, I'm here to inform you viewers, animals eat feed and fodder. Animals do not eat waste. What is not good for you is not good for an animal, especially an animal that you're looking forward to eating at a later time. Therefore, that contaminated produce can only be incinerated, not even burnt, incinerated. If we are going to get that dosage of aflatoxins from our system. And therefore, it is not good for a fertilizer. Because Professor Kai and colleagues also told me to say that the aflatoxins will remain alive in the soils and wait for another cereal to be planted. So now you can see the contamination of our food system can even start before planting. It can as well be a contaminated seed. Many farmers, harvesting time is a very difficult time, especially in the present era of climate change, when the rains are no longer predictable. They are happening anytime. So many of them delay harvesting their maize from the gardens, and the cobs drop off the stalks. In the evening, they bring in more moisture. So when we talked about that, farmers and traders, and I'm happy, Professor, you met traders, they resorted to taking shelling machines into the farms. And then they shell maize from the farms, bag it, and throw it on the truck, and drive to another farm, and drive to another farm, and drive to another farm. So the grains are on that truck for a whole week. If they were clean, they are now getting contaminated. When we were in Mubende, farmers told us that some of us have been taught about aflatoxins, and we are trying our level best to abide to best practices of drying properly, storing properly, harvesting on time. But when the traders come, they collect my clean maize and put it together with Kaya's unclean maize, and the story continues, go and bag it together in their storage facilities. This is another haven of contamination. The transportation. When we were in Chiriandongo and we were discussing with the processors and off-takers, they have primary processing mills. And they told us that, okay, some of us at our mills, we try to see that we only take clean maize to the best of their ability. But there are other mills that accept everything that has come around. So contamination taking place at the processing level. Of course, I have already talked about the storage level, like in schools, but even in households. Many of us construct our houses with bedrooms, with even guest rooms, as if for you sleep at where you go to visit. But we construct houses with guest wings, kitchens, living rooms, balcons, and all those fancy things. Many of us do not create a space that meets the standards to keep food. COVID revealed this to many of us. We buy and dump in the kitchen, and then we keep scooping with wet cups and so on and so forth. Therefore, aflatoxin control and management is every person's business, because number one, food moves a very long journey, and in one way or the other, this food gets into your hands. But then the other thing is, all of us are clients of contaminated food, and therefore, our direct route is heading to Mulago Cancer Institute, and so far now, we only have one center. So this is where we ourselves directly, or where our children or those that under our leadership are heading. And I'm very happy that the president is weighing in. And part of our responsibility is to ask him to hold on his executive order a little, such that we give him this big information to broaden his executive order, because he cannot preside over a sick population. A sick population is unproductive. A sick population is a very big burden to the national resources, to the social networks and infrastructure. It is not one that can be presided over by a leader worth his or her name. But the beauty is, aflatoxin control and management is manageable, because largely the gaps and cracks and holes that must be plugged and stitched are in practice, are in attitude, are in behavior. I think I can leave it at that, Henry.
Thank you very much, Agnes. One thing that I've really liked, you have put the human face into the discussion, localizing it, putting it in our day-to-day life. And I like where you commended the president and asking him to hold on the directive so that he can give a broad best directive, looking at grains, cereals, and also liked where you're telling us, me and you, those that are watching us, whether in Uganda or in the global world, food safety, issues to do with the microtoxins is our business. Irrespective of that, there are major players here, like the duty bearers, like His Excellency. He is a chief duty bearer, driving, using the political will, allocating resources for inspection, awareness, research, to make sure, and capacity building, to make sure that food that comes on. Agnes, the other thing that I really liked when you tuned into feed and fodder, as consumers, as professionals, poultry, livestock in general, those are food producing animals. What they take in comes to our plate. And when I tell it to people, most of the time they say, food producing animals. I say, yes, the eggs get contaminated, milk gets contaminated, beef gets contaminated, everything. And colleagues, you and Professor have made the Humanist TV very rich. And I would like to thank you all that. Bernard, a wake-up call. Agnes finished telling us we have got all these mansions, these bungalows, but they lack one department in them. How good practice in handling food in the pantries, in our stores. Can you imagine having an air conditioned in the sitting room, but where you keep food that keeps you healthy is steaming hot and breeding aflatoxin molds in those mansions, the billion mansion, the $1 million mansions that cannot take care of food? So, Bernard, what are the consumer views? What are the consumers saying when you reach out and you get different players. Do the consumers know that aflatoxin affects them? Do they know that they are microtoxins? Do they know that if they handle leftovers badly, they will end up poisoning themselves? What are the consumer perceptions with regards to food? Bernard, the floor is yours, and we look forward to your sharing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Henry, for leading us through. And Agnes, Agnes and Professor Kaya, when you guys have talked now, you and I are one. So we always have very, I'd say, the same kind of thinking, but you guys are high there. You're so supersonic that sometimes I don't catch up with you because of your commitment to this subject matter. Henry, maybe to begin with, you know, from the Christian perspective, I heard that when Jesus was going away, he left some commandments. And one of the commandments was that we should love one another. And whenever I discuss this subject, I think that food safety is the manifestation of the commandment of loving one another. I also remember that when Jesus was leaving, he said that do to others what you would actually want them to do for you. So when you look at the food safety issue, and specifically when you look at the issue of aflatoxins, I wanted to put my emphasis on the issue of fraud, food fraud, that many farmers, many traders tend to get contaminated maize, even when they know that this maize is contaminated, but they keep pushing it to the market and they forget that actually their own children will actually find this food in the schools. As if that is not enough, there is no trader or there is no farmer who is actually going to eat the food or the maize or groundnuts or whatever that they actually produced. Many times they will produce the food and send it for processing. Now imagine sending contaminated food, even when you're aware, and you send it to the market, you will still go and buy it in that same market and you'll still eat it. So when it comes to the aspect of food safety and looking at aflatoxins, it's everyone's business because you are going to produce the food, you contaminate it with aflatoxins because of your poor handling, you send it out there to the processor just makes it flour and sends it back to the market where you're going to find your own food. So that's why I'm saying that this thing is just the manifestation of doing what you want other people to do for you. And this is the biblical concept. If I was a pastor, that is what I would actually tell people. The issue of love comes in food safety, that what you do and you think will not with you, it will find your child in a school, it will find you in your home because you're going to buy flour and you'll eat it. Now, Henry, I want to show our viewers some of the practices that are actually contaminating the food. Of course, building on what our colleagues have been sharing. Now, if you look at those pictures, this is how our food gets messed up, and this is how our food gets the aflatoxins that we are talking about. If you look at how this lady is drying her nuts, after some little time, remember it is on bare ground and the heat, all that, and so she'll unshell them and keep them maybe in a moist place, etc. And at the end of the day, they start developing this mold that we are talking about. Now, this lady, can I say she doesn't know what she's doing? Probably yes. So how do we ensure that all these farmers are actually reached out to? Because these groundnuts, she's going to eat them and her household. If they don't eat them the way they are, she will send them to the market and she'll go back to buy them as pest or pested, whatever, and she'll still eat them. If you look at the second photo there, farmers are now drying their maize in the gardens and whatever, and they start getting this mold. And now the farmer may not necessarily get this maize and roast it, but rather she's going to get this maize, which is already having probably moisture and perhaps aflatoxins, takes them to the processing unit, they process them, and she goes back to the shop and buys posho, and then she eats it. Now, who did the challenge? Where was the challenge? The challenge was in the garden where she was drying. And at the end of the day, moisture came in and all that. And then at the end of the day, aflatoxins. And by the way, she may not even eat this maize, but the school will come and procure maize or maize flour, and her children go and find it there. So even the little money that she has earned will go back to treat her child, because that child has actually eaten aflatoxin endowed food. And so the cancers come in and all that. If you look at this gentleman, probably they have told us that, okay, you have to, dry this maize on a tarpaulin, and then because of social behavior change issues, you think you are not the one going to eat this food. You buy a tarpaulin, which is okay, but you use the tarpaulin for a wrong purpose. You're getting a tarpaulin, but you're covering it on maize, which is on bare ground. So you know very well that the most contaminated media we have is actually soil, because of the biomass and all this. But the food is on bare ground. It is accumulating moisture. But also, if you look at that tarpaulin, it's a black tarpaulin. So every time you cover it on top of this maize, it is going to start having some bit of sweat, which is kind of moisture. And this is where the trouble starts coming from. And at the end of the day, this farmer thinks that this maize is going out. She's going to sell it, get money to take her children to school, but forgetting that actually her children will still find this maize busy in the schools. Just imagine if we have 18 million students who are in school. That simply means that you have about 54 million plates in a term, because that would mean actually in a day, because if you have 18 million people taking a cup of porridge in the morning and then 2 plates of posho in the afternoon, it means every day you're serving 54 million plates at a school. But where did this maize come from? The maize came from our homes, and we thought that this maize will not be eaten by us, so we handled it the way we want to handle it. So our children will find it. Our husbands who are soldiers will find it. Our children who are in prisons will find it on their plates. Even us, when we go to restaurants, we shall find back that food and we eat it. So it's a responsibility of all of us. If you look at that other photo in the middle, there was a wedding, and this rich man put the maize on the road that is actually heading to the wedding. So everybody who drove to that wedding drove on top of that maize. So it's really not only getting contaminated with the vehicle tires and everybody is treading on that food, but also it is bringing out the aspect that, well, moisture will be there, poor handling of food, and at the end of the day, aflatoxins will accumulate and people will eat, and we shall keep dying. So if you also look at the way people are handling food on tarmac roads, you find food on rusted iron sheets, you find men and women having conversations on the maize grain, you find cows and animals or whatever, they are all stepping on the food there. All these are food safety challenges that bring us problems when it comes to our health, our economy, and what Agnes and Professor were talking about. Now, we are the same consumers who are producing this food. At a particular node, you're a producer, but at another, you're a consumer. So you have to be keen. How am I handling food for the next user and myself when it comes to the consumption patterns? So this is how aflatoxins keep building in the food of human beings, how people are really handling food. But my question here is, what happened with our leaders? All these communities you're seeing, food drying on tarmac roads, food being, dried everywhere on the roadside and whatever. There are leaders who are also passing by. So the question is, why aren't we arresting people, for instance, who are mishandling our food? Because they are contributing to death, disease burden of our people. And I think this is the issue of leadership. If you realize when the president came up with a statement and threatened to stop the trade of GNATs, the traders themselves mobilized themselves and came to the university. Just imagine traders coming to the university to seek knowledge. Could it mean that they do not know? Could it mean that the governance issue, what the president said, is triggering this? What about if the LC1s, LC3s, LC5s, and the RDCs, if they had the same campaigns in their communities? I think we would do better. So I want to urge that as consumers and as traders, as food handlers, we need to take food safety as our own, because that is the only manifestation we have to handle food rightly and to make sure that we show love, because that is the way we can show love to people who are going to eat our food, and to do to others what we would want them to do to us. So handle the food that you're going to give to your neighbor the way you would want them to handle the food that is coming to you. If you look at our processors, please, as you process this food, remember that the traders will come and pick it from your processing unit, and tomorrow you'll go and buy it. So use equipment, use machinery, use all tactics to make sure that the food is remaining safer for consumption. If we don't do that, both the vendor and the trader, at a particular time, there will be consumers, they will eat this food and they will die. So I urge all of us to make sure that where we are handling food, we are sensitive and we are handling it out of love, out of courtesy, out of faithfulness, and ensuring that we don't have food fraud to contaminate the food that our people are going to eat. So Henry, I think that is what I needed to share in the remaining few minutes. Now that our time is also running out, I think that can add value to the discussion. Otherwise, Professor and Agnes, we are so excited that you shared with us your experiences and shared with us widely on this subject matter. So let us keep the conversation. Let us keep reaching out to the people. Let us scale up awareness. Let us scale up capacity building. Let the government invest money in solutions that can actually prevent and minimize aflatoxins in our food. And I think with those, we can be able to improve the status quo of food safety in the country. Thank you, Henry, and over to you.
Thank you very much, colleagues, Professor Kaya, Agnes, and Bernard. The question is, whom am I to start diluting? That will be unscrupulous of me, but that will be unethical of me. The only ethic and scrupulous thing I need to do is to thank you for giving us the best curtain riser for the month of February. And we are going to continue next Friday, still looking at aflatoxin and how best to move forward ahead. Colleagues, what you have done today is putting human face on aflatoxin, taking it out of shelves, taking it out of labs, and bringing it to the daily, day-to-day life. Touching social, touching economic, environmental, and also the systematic approach. I loved Agnes and Prof and Bernard when you brought in transport. People don't look at transport, touching it at household. So today's station is a new, it is like seeing old wine in a new bottle, because we've been discussing aflatoxin for decades, but the approach my colleagues have used today is making it a new subject matter, simplifying it, giving it to us, the consumers. So now, as the consumers, we need now to go in and we advocate, seek governance, call on to government to action, tell the food businesses, you are doing us bad. We are your market. You're killing us. You're killing our animals, our livelihoods, our food security, our environment, the natural resources that the contaminated produce feeds on. So every aspect of life, every aspect of the environment, every aspect of business is directly and indirectly affected. Thus, humanity as consumers, we are affected. Let's take corrective responsibilities, get more awareness, get support research, support capacity building, and we advocate for good governance of the agri-food systems for our sustainability and resilience. Thank you very much, colleagues. Until next Friday, it was a great honor.